Hey there, family. It is exactly 7 p.m., so we are starting on time. Welcome to another episode of our Health and Humanity Fireside Chat series. We are so excited, as always, to have you with us. I want to thank you, as always, just for lending of your time, sharing your evening with us for what I always feel like these are really important conversations for us to have. Tonight is going to be no exception. So, as always, just a few little, housekeeping things. Again, this is a chat. This is meant to be conversational. It's meant to be engaging. So, we want you throughout tonight to be able to share your comments, share your questions, your feedback. We want this, to again make sure that it is interactive. Again, and if we pop something in there, we'll be able to throw that kind of up on the screen and be able to respond to you in real time. As always, I want to thank the founder and CEO of the Balm and Gilead, our visionary leader, Dr. Pernessa Seal, the entire Balm and Gilead team. I usually have Mr. Goodman with me here, but he had some things come up. But just still, thank you to the entire team who makes all of the work that we do, as impactful as we can make it. So, also, just before we get started, if you wouldn't mind just dropping in the chat as you join to let us know where you are watching from and kind of what is your burning question about menopause, because that's what tonight's conversation is going to be about, family. It's going to be about menopause and that crucial crossroads of how it impacts our mental health and well-being. And trust me when I tell you, it's a lot we're going to unpack. We want to be mindful of your time, so we want to we don't want to hold you longer than necessary, but we do want to make sure that we are providing some really great information to you. And again, as with every chat, I cannot have these conversations by myself. I'm so fortunate to have guests who are always willing to give of their time and expertise, and tonight is no exception. I'm so excited to have with us. So if you can please give just a virtual round of applause to the amazing Dr. Allison Matthew Allen. Hey. I am so excited just to have you. I know it's been a minute since we connected. And
Yes.
when I was thinking about, hey, look, we want to, have this conversation around mental health, around women's health, around menopause, I was like, Dr. Allison would be amazing. So thank
Oh,
you
thank
first
you.
and
I
foremost.
appreciate you having me here.
Yes. And family, I want us also just to tonight, and I give Dr. Allison time. She's definitely going to share more about herself and also her amazing work. You guys know I really don't like reading bios. I like to let the speakers tell what they want to tell about themselves. But I do want to share, and again, just kudos and thanks again to you. So, Dr. Allison is postpartum. She just had her baby.
Yes.
So she has so many irons in the fire right now. So again, I just want to thank you again. Motherhood uh, at any time is always, a challenging, and we're stretched thin all the time. But I know in that newborn, phase, that infant is still a lot happening to
It
our
is a lot,
body. Yeah. So
but it's a lot of fun.
it is. It is. It's a beautiful experience. So, family, I'm going to level set us as to why this conversation, why are we having it? Why are we even talking about menopause? It's everywhere, for one. So, if you've been living under a rock, then maybe you don't know. But menopause is finally having its moment. But there's some things happening within the menopause space, especially for Black women and women of color, that we aren't having the conversation. So I want to level set us as always as to why does this even matter? Why do we want you to come on tonight? So for starters, I think it's important for us to know that while hot flashes and night sweats are the sexy symptoms of menopause, that's usually those symptoms get all of the attention. A lot of the newer treatments and things that are available are really targeting the hot flashes and night sweats because they are exceptionally problematic. However, there are over 30 different symptoms that we can experience from perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause. So we don't talk about those. The brain fog is real. waking up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at literally your ceiling and not knowing why, that's a challenge that we don't talk about. I think it's also important for us. I want us to know that for Black women, for women of color, we are entering menopause earlier and we are staying in it longer than anyone is actually telling us about. That's a problem. And then I think also really understanding of all of its impacts, not just its physical impacts. We know that about 10% of women actually leave the workplace and workforce because of menopause. And this is a natural occurring thing for women to have. You live long enough, you're probably going to experience. If you're like me, I got to experience it in my 20s thanks to being chemically put into menopause for some other things. But we're going to experience it. And the fact that, again, 10% of us are having to leave the workplace for something that is just a part of natural aging, we have to talk about it. So, with all that being said, again, I'm so happy to have Dr. Allison here. So, as always, Dr. Allison, I really like for our guests just to kind of share, introduce yourself and then just share your why. Why is this work? Why the work that you do through your organization and through your work? Why is this work so important to you, and why do you do it?
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. That my why is pretty extensive, but I'll try to keep it somewhat brief for this conversation. I do have two companies that are both relevant for this conversation. Community Expert Solutions is a company that consults with pharmaceutical companies on how to improve diversity and recruitment and retention for clinical trials. And we do a lot of community engagement and health education. And we have a platform called Curated Clinical that engages with community about clinical trials. And then we have Second Shift Playbook, which is also very relevant to this conversation because second shift is that additional kind of labor that women have to perform with your home and your family, that in addition to the work that you do. And so we started Second Shift Playbook as a way to create community for women and provide resources and educate and talk about some of the issues that women face as they transition from working to mothers to menopause and beyond and retirement. My why is, I guess I see so many of my family members and people in my community who don't have access to the resources that they need and suffering unnecessarily. And you really see, like, unfortunately, in my work, in my line of work, you've seen a lot of life and death consequences to that, to
Mm-hmm.
policy decisions, and to lack of information. And so I've always had a passion for addressing stigma, talking about misinformation, and empowering and creating opportunity for community to make changes in their own community and not just be dependent on the infrastructure that was not built for us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So, and that's why, family, again, we want to dig into tonight's conversation. There was so much, again, that you just touched on that I think for those of us who are in this work, whether it be the health equity space, public health space, healthcare space, I think we all are drawn to it because, like, to your point, we've seen it play out in our own families. We've seen disparities play out in our communities. And it's oftentimes alarming that we keep repeating or keep regurgitating the same types of disparities and the same, issues and challenges and barriers, despite all the advances that we have in technology and with healthcare today, that we still have that. And so when we think about, menopause, again, you are a health equity strategist, you're a Black woman yourself. Again, you are
Yeah.
in having, in postpartum yourself. Why, what brought you, I think, to this conversation, and from your perspective, how do you see menopause and mental health being connected, and why is it so urgent for us to have this conversation right now?
Well, one of the things that few people know about women's health, in particular for Black women, is this idea of the weathering hypothesis. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but It's this idea that Black women, when you look at Black women's bodies over time, you actually see that their bodies have aged, accelerated their aging. You
Wow.
know, say at the age of 40, you compare a Black woman and a white woman, their bodies have aged because of the stress. And that, you know, even though Black don't crack, it
Right.
does crack on the inside, unfortunately, because of the
Yeah.
stress that we experience. And so, you know, the menopause kind of disparities are really kind of a continuation of the disparities that we have in our
Mm-hmm.
reproductive experiences, you know, with
Mm-hmm.
you know, early childhood deaths and early, you know, morbidity and mortality for children as well as for Black mothers. And
Yeah.
that stress and that trauma is then continued on through menopause, in the sense
Yeah.
that we don't get enough sleep. Our stress loads stay high, through allostatic load stays high, and it doesn't go down, right? And it
Yeah.
that and we stay in this state of adrenaline our most of our lives, most of our careers. We're overachievers, right?
Aren't we?
In
We got those
addition,
capes flapping.
we're overachievers in addition to, you know, the work that we do with our family and carrying the load of caring for our families. And that puts a huge toll on us.
Yeah.
And so that has a direct impact on your mental health. When, you know, the symptoms of postpartum are very similar to the symptoms of menopause. So that's also an interesting kind of like uh, layer for me as someone who is in perimenopause and postpartum at the same time. The hormonal shifts, I mean, I didn't understand it until now. But like, I mean, I just start crying, brain fog, literally all the same symptoms, you
Yeah.
know, and
Wow.
the depression and also, here's the thing, these intrusive thoughts
Mm.
that make you think that horrible things are about to happen, right? So like
Yeah.
those are directly tied to your mental health, and so we really have to figure out a way to talk about it so that we can feel like we're not alone and address
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So you brought up like some really, really amazing things, and I know we're gonna touch on that. And also, family, again, like if you hear something that resonates with you, if there's something that you're like, I've never heard of that, but I'd like to know more. Again, like make sure that you're just dropping those comments or questions in the chat, so that way we can have a chance to address those and perhaps lift those up, because you may not be the only one who had that question. I know when you mentioned again, just kind of the shifts in the hormones. I think again, even thinking of the intrusive thoughts, as you said, or all those different connections. It's really interesting when you said that. I thought about the Balm and Gilead had the pleasure of doing a study specifically in African American women. Um, with some great partners of ours. We surveyed almost 400 women all across the country, different, ages, demographics, socioeconomic backgrounds. And it was really interesting and alarming in a way, is that when we dug into the symptoms, when we stripped back from just, hot flashes and night sweats, mental health, so anxiety and depression, we
Mm-hmm.
had a significant number of women who were saying, I am experiencing, and I hadn't. So this is not like I already had a diagnosis of, an anxiety disorder, already had, a mental health diagnosis. Like I had been moving along in my life fine. But like you said, now I'm actually having, these thoughts that are counter to, what you had previously, been thinking. And for that to be happening, the average onset or age of onset for the women in our study was 38.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And considering that all the other research shows that we stay in, we move and kind of progress, through the menopause journey, and can be in that, true definitive space of moving from perimenopause into menopause for, you're talking about over a decade
Mm-hmm.
of your life. So that's again, you're having a family, you're raising perhaps young children, you're in the prime of like your professional career. And so this is, again, I think one of those things that we have to really make sure women have that information that they need. And kind of, speaking of that information, can you talk about, I think, just how we are recognizing it, right? Because we already know clinicians aren't really asking, women about it. It's not being brought up in your annual wellness visits for most women, especially women of color. And so, um how, or would you describe, like, us even as women recognizing something has changed or recognizing this shift? And then why do you think it does take some time for us to be able to put a name to it?
Um, well, I think some of the things that like, I'm not a medical doctor. First of all, I have a PhD, so I'm not going to give you all the signs and symptoms of menopause, but I can say that you should make sure that you ask for a metabolic panel and a hormonal panel from your doctor, from your gynecologist, and make sure that you go get, like, get your, not only that, but get your, like, kind of um, your nutrition levels checked as well, like magnesium and potassium and iron and all of those things, because they're all kind of tied together. And vitamin D also. I've noticed that all of those levels can get out of whack. And a lot of times the doctor will, you know, kind of uh, cast off your symptoms as stress or other things and not think about it as menopause, because the typical woman is not going into menopause at 38, and so they're thinking
Right.
that can't be it. But actually, for Black women, if you think about it, we actually start, a lot of Black girls start their periods at 8 and 9 years old.
Yeah.
So we're starting our entire reproductive journey way earlier, which makes sense why we would start menopause earlier. And
Hmm.
so we really have to, and this is another thing that we have to think about. This is, I love this book. It's the fifth vital sign, and it talks about
Mm.
menstruation as the fifth vital sign, and it's really an important indicator of your overall health and well-being. One of the things that I
Wow.
love about my friends is that we're starting to talk about this openly with each other. Millennials, I think, are kind of pushing the boundaries that our mothers and grandmothers would not talk about. It was always just like, make sure you don't have high blood pressure, keep your salt down, but that was it. Like, there was no conversation about it, and I could not tell you when my mom went through menopause, because
Exactly.
she never talked about it. um,
Same. Is we know they
yeah.
went through it. Like, we know you all had it, but yeah, we didn't know when, how long it lasted, what you felt like.
No, no idea. None.
Wow. Wow.
And so, now my friends are talking about it. We're trying to share information with each other so that we can break that cycle, and hopefully change the trajectory of how things are happening in our communities, right?
Yeah. Wow.
I hope I answered your
So
question. I don't even
no,
remember
you
what the
you
question
did.
was.
You did. No, you did perfectly. And
Okay.
again, like, and yes, and yes. So, you know, Dr. Allison, yes, she is not an MD. But if you do have those types of questions, so if you kind of want a list of that 30 something, 30 plus symptoms that I mentioned that women can experience as they enter into to perimenopause, we also have just the resources. So I want to also just, like, make sure, because I do think, even when, if we think about perimenopause, menopause, what is it? So I want to, make sure we're all aware of that as well. So perimenopause is that transition. It's the
Mhm.
transition period that is leading into menopause. It's beginning, typically, again, to most women, in your mid to late 40s, but as we've shared already, Black women are entering this into our, our late 30s. But again, that, and it's happening because, as you mentioned, we're having changes in our estrogen and progesterone levels. All right, so those are beginning to decline and they fluctuate. That's where the irregularity begins. And We hope to have, or the bomb is working on having some additional conversations, even about us understanding the role that estrogen as a hormone plays across so many areas of our life, biologically. And there are so many different disease states and different health conditions that your estrogen levels will play a role and a factor in. Cancer is one of those that I know we've touched on before in the past. But perimenopause can last anywhere between 2 to 10 years. So that's a very long time. And again, as I mentioned, we know that Black women or women of color are actually staying in this state even longer than that. And the symptoms, again, become, phases. And as Dr. Allison said, oftentimes because it's stress, you're not sleeping, you're overworked, the brain fog and life happening, we don't even pay attention to it. We think it's just a part of, life. Weight begins to pack on, even though you're hitting the gym, every day, you're watching what you're eating and you're still maintaining and or gaining weight. And so these are all things that we can experience as we're experiencing perimenopause. Now, menopause, when we say menopause, this is more of a clinical definition. So this is being defined as 12 consecutive months without your period, without your menstrual cycle. That is menopause. So that again is the difference between perimenopause and menopause, because I also think that sometimes those get either used interchangeably or incorrectly, or we use them and no one ever really kind of explains what that is. So I did want to make sure that we provided that. And then, as always, you can feel free to join our mailing list if you have questions about it that we didn't cover today. If you have more medical related questions, we have some resource guides and other things that we can definitely provide to you to make sure that you have all the answers that you need. So I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned it in terms of your work with the Second Shift Playbook. And I talked earlier about how, we have about 10% of women who are leaving, the workplace. We've done, there's been studies about, the workplace is just really not conducive to women as they're, in perimenopause and menopause. So considering that work, how do you see menopause perhaps impacting and or just landing differently for these women, as you mentioned, who are carrying all these second shift, kind of responsibilities, and really what can we do about it? Like, how can, what are some of the things that you offer through like second shift and the conversations that you have with that can help women,
Yeah.
again, as we're navigating all of it?
Well, so, I think some of the things that menopause can impact, and I guess to also answer your previous question, you'll start to see lighter periods that will eventually go away, right? Like, or they'll be irregular. And then that leads to in addition to the hot flashes and the inability to sleep, but also you're experiencing like weakness and osteoporosis and, these other kind of issues. Heart disease becomes a much more significant issue, especially for Black women. Um, and hair loss, those
Mhm.
are things that women, we often experience through stress, but we also experience it, and it's exacerbated through menopause. Uh, what the issue that I see with women entering into menopause in the workforce is also that you're simultaneously caring for your elderly parents. And so what ends up happening is you're putting all your energy into caring for your elderly parents and or your children at the same time. We call it the sandwich generation. And your issues, your symptoms, your heart disease, your diabetes, your high blood pressure, all of those things that are increasing risk and increasing kind of prevalence as you age and go through menopause are being put on the back burner and being
Yeah.
ignored. And so what often ends up happening is that the caregiver, and that's why second shift is focusing on your role as a caregiver. The caregiver's needs are often put on the back burner, and they end up becoming oftentimes sicker than the people that they're caring for.
Yeah.
So, that then impacts your ability to work because not only are you caring for other people, but then you can't work because you're sick and you're tired and you're overworked, like all of those things. So that, that I guess affects your ability to just be able to show up and
Yeah.
be present and be at full capacity.
Yeah. So, and you know what's interesting, even as you were sharing that, is that we hear that in other disease spaces as well. So like we hear that with also, so caregivers of individuals living or impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia, is
Right.
that there's and that is also more women. So
Hmm.
two-thirds of caregivers for a parent, a spouse, or a loved one who is experiencing dementia is also women, and two-thirds of individuals living with Alzheimer's are women. So it's just like, I love being a woman. I wouldn't want him to been anything else. But I do think conversations like this are so important because we have to know, um, one, an understanding of our bodies, and I think understanding of, as you said, these shifts through life, right? So all these different responsibilities that we have, but then also being able to give ourselves the proper tools, to give ourselves the grace, to give ourselves the supports that we need, so that we, like you said, we can show up in all the spaces that we need to show up, be fully present and be ourselves. But I also want to challenge us to family at this point to also consider the spaces or the time where you're investing energy, the things that you are taking on that you don't have to take on, or the things that you're taking on solo and individually that you don't have to take those on by yourself. Like no is a full complete sentence. So I did want to say that as well, because I think we do, stand in the gap for so many, and we do show up for so many others. But because, again, whether we're talking about menopause, whether we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about all the different chronic, conditions that we have, and just aging in general, I do think that's also just important for us to be mindful, and to, say, I can't do that. And I want to, being able to pivot, being able to pause, being able to, stop for a second, and prioritize our health, and especially our mental health. So I wanted to just kind of make that note because, I know how it is. I know that journey all too
Yeah.
well.
I think second shift playbook, the big focus is on helping women set those kinds of boundaries and identify places in their life where they can take a step back or find ways to like get support.
Yeah.
And one of the other somewhat encouraging things I see, in research is that Black men, especially of my age, the millennial men, are more involved in the household, and so
Mm.
some of that second shift is shifting a little bit, even though it's still the majority of the responsibility still falls in women's shoulders, but
Yeah.
men are starting to step up, and that's part of the issue, right? Is it's not
Yeah.
just inherent that women go through these things, it's set up as a systemic issue that
Right.
the policies, the environment that we're in, the social norms that we are
Yeah.
experiencing are then exacerbating our our menopause symptoms and the health disparities that we experience, especially in the Black community.
Yeah. And that actually kind of connects to where I want to kind of take the conversation to next. And that's really thinking about the stigma, the silence, and just our culture, right, in general. And I think, as you pointed out, while we are seeing some really good positive shifts, in terms of others, whether that's, being men more present, I know I'm blessed. My husband cooks most of the meals in our home. One, he's just a better
Thank
cook than
God.
I am. Yes, amen. Thank you. Shout out, Mr. Price. Thank you. And that, that is maybe not the norm for most households, but I appreciate that. So I do value that. I think, yes, we're starting to see some of those cultural shifts, but we do know, again, like you and I touched on, and neither one of us know when our mom, grandparents, aunties, ever went through menopause. And so it has historically, I think, just been that topic that, whether it be from embarrassment, whether it be from, that's just one of the things that as a community, we're not talking about that. Um, where does that silence, do you think, in your opinion, where does it come from,
Mm.
and what do you see as our greatest cost because of that silence?
The silence, I think, comes from multiple things. It's the, we don't talk about things outside of this household. Um, Even when I was preparing for marriage, that was the biggest advice that I got was don't talk about anything outside of your marriage and outside of your household. And it's just this kind of norm that we just don't talk about things. You keep everything silent. You keep it in house. But that is also tied to us trying to combat stereotypes, especially
Mm,
about Black women and hypersexualization. And so we've gone to the other extreme of not talking at all about our reproductive systems, our health, and then there's also kind of mistrust,
mm,
which is in many ways validly placed,
yeah.
against the health system. And so we not only are we not talking about it, but we're also not seeking care for it. And we think
Hmm.
that we are strong enough, we can just get through it. And a lot of even the surveys, when you survey, it's interesting that your survey showed that there was a high level of depression because for the past few decades, when you surveyed Black women, you actually wouldn't see high levels
Yeah.
of, they wouldn't score themselves as experiencing
Hmm.
depression because they were so used to the symptoms and the experience of stress and trauma.
Yeah.
But now we're becoming, now because we're having these conversations, is actually helping us identify those things and hopefully break that cycle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's tied to this generational trauma that I think really we are really trying to be intentional about
Mm,
breaking down.
yeah. And what and I tend to think because again we've had conversations before, but what is that silence costing us? Like what is most at risk if we continue to remain, if we continue to have generation after generation hearing that same thing that you heard in terms of whatever's happening in your house stays in your house, we don't talk about it.
I hate to be nihilistic, but let's think about the stats here.
Yeah.
Little girls are having their periods earlier, which then
Hmm.
means we're not getting married at earlier ages. We're not having children until our 30s and 40s. And many women, especially Black women who are getting educated and have high income, are not able to have children, right? And so that's a huge issue, right? Like when you talk
Yeah.
about being able to continue to the next generation, eventually if we continue in the way that we have been, the kind of dire consequences of that are that we won't be able to continue on. And so I
Mm,
know that sounds extreme, but it's a real scenario when you're thinking about how the patterns are, what the trajectory is and the patterns that we have right now. And so we really have to be intentional about, and this is the other thing, like menopause, it's stress, but it's also the food we eat, it's the
mm,
environment we live in,
yeah.
and it's the chemicals that we ingest,
Yeah.
the plastic is in everything, that it mimics estrogen and then
Yeah.
increases our risk for fibroids and cancer,
Hmm.
and then puts us into early menopause, right? So
Right.
those are things that we have to pay attention to and minimize as well.
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted, like, again, we wanted this to be unfiltered. We want this to be unapologetic and real. And I love that you actually pointed that out, that there are just trends right now that we see in the data
Hmm.
that, to your point, like, it's easy to see how if we continue to remain silent, and if we continue to make things culturally acceptable that are actually harmful to us, then that's kind of where we end up. And I think sometimes that is one of the conversations, or the part of this conversation around stigma, around silence, that we don't like to have because it's uncomfortable, because it's calling us as a community to the carpet to say, what type of social and societal cultural norms have we just accepted as being correct, right, and being afraid to challenge those. I think, to your point, I think that is what leads us to having all of these different disparities and inequities. Yes, the systems are broken, but there are things that we control. Again, certain things that we eat that we know we shouldn't eat, not getting and trying to get that 30 minutes of physical activity in early on, the examples that we give to our children in terms of starting it early. Again, as you mentioned, if our girls are entering into, their reproductive life and cycles at the ages of 8 and 9, what conversations have we had with them other than don't get pregnant? Like, we know our families,
Right.
we know, like, we're going to say that. We're going to tell them, don't get pregnant, don't bring a baby into this house. But it kind of ends there in terms of any type of sexual and or reproductive education that we're providing. And, that is scary as a mom now of a 12-year-old who, you know, I want to make sure she is starting whatever wellness habits I feel she's going to need as one
Right.
day she's going to start, experience, start her journey into menopause. I want her to have that. So again, I talked to her about what she's eating. She has started joining me working out. And,
That's
those are, I
good.
think, how we shift things generationally. How do we make sure that
Yeah.
our kids will know my mom started menopause here? This is what menopause was like for my mom, because, we're here
That's
today
great.
having these conversations.
I think the other consequence is the cost of healthcare. We
Mm,
Even if we live longer, the years that we're living are going to be plagued with disease, and the
yeah.
cost of going to the doctors all the time, and that gets expensive, and it also impacts our ability to pass on generational wealth, and it
Mm,
impacts our quality of life. And those are things that you see disproportionately impacting Black women,
yeah.
who tend to live longer than Black men. And then where we as Black women who are living longer, with single incomes, right? Like, so it's a compacting generational
Yeah.
consequence.
Yeah. So how you just presented that, how you frame that family, that is why we wanted to even have chats like this. This is why we wanted to, again, look at health, look at humanity, and look at all the ways in which everything and so much of our lives is so interconnected. And we often don't think that. I think we get in silos, both in just our behaviors, we get in silos both in just our day-to-day interactions, but I also think that we view our health and our wellness also in silos. We can feel like, I can talk about, cardiovascular disease, we can talk about cancer, but only maybe certain types of cancers, supposed to, all of the types of cancers, but I do feel like, yes, when we start thinking about conversations around menopause, when we think about those that, again, for whatever reason has to do with a woman's body and the changes that our bodies go through as we just continue to age, it's just like, yeah, there's this this wall that almost just kind of like comes up that was like, nope, we're not going
Yeah.
to talk about that, despite its economical impacts, despite its psychological impacts. And so that's just always fascinating to me. And so I want to shift us kind of again, um, you know, to really think about now of moving forward. How do we reclaim this narrative, the old narratives, how do we replace those? How do we reclaim where we are today, the generation, millennials, all of us together now, especially again for millennials who are, perimenopause right now and experiencing. How do we reclaim that narrative? How do we shift that and begin to move things forward?
Well, going back to second shift playbook, I think the things that we talk about are, not being afraid to have those conversations with each other, sharing resources. I'm in a group, I'm in several group chats with several different women groups, and we're always talking, like kind of just showing up for each other, and like not just sharing the good things that are happening in our lives, but also like what's the stress, what's the hard times, the depression, the tough moments, and trying to be there for each other. um we it's important for women to convene and be in community with each other, whether it's in text message, online, or in person. I really think, especially after COVID, it's really important for us to meet in person and to be there for each other in person. um, I think it also is us advocating for ourselves when we go to the doctor and talking to the doctors about getting all the information that we can about our metabolic health, about our hormonal health. And unless the doctor is charged with looking at those things, they probably won't. And so
Mhm.
you have to push for that, and asking for the full workup when if you're gonna if I'm gonna get my blood drawn, look at everything. Don't just look at the little, look at everything. I want to know the whole thing. Uh, and get it done consistently so you can see the trends, and so they can
Yeah.
see trends over time, because that's a big part of it too. You think just one blood draw and that's going to answer all your questions. No, it's understanding how you, and also trusting and tracking your own health, your own symptoms,
Mm.
so that
Yeah.
you can tell the doctor, this is what I know my body has been doing over the past couple of weeks or past couple of months, so they can have more information. A lot of times people go to the doctor and they just think the doctor's supposed to just know and tell them. But actually, you are in charge of your own health, and the doctor is there to just kind of interpret. And a lot of it is, that's what they call it, the practice of medicine, because they
Right.
are practicing on you, like they're not guessing, but they're using whatever information they have to be able to give you the best care they can. But if you don't give them the information, and if you're not tracking it
Yeah.
yourself, then that's going to impact it. So making sure that
Yes.
you are doing your job to track yourself and keep track of who you are, and your menstrual cycles, your hormonal shifts, your temperature changes, your mental
Yeah.
fog, and all of those things, so that you can give the information to the doctor, and they are part of your team. So think about it
Yeah.
that way.
Wow. So I love that framing of like they are part of your team, right? So, and you are the coach, right? You
Yes.
are the coach of your team that should be in charge of your health and well being. It's funny as you were talking, I thought my sister called. Matter of fact, just this week, and she was like, "Oh my God, sister, I think I think I'm experiencing perimenopause." I was like, okay, well, why? Right. So
Yeah.
she's running off, and I told her, I say, yes, that sounds about right. She's like, but
Yeah.
my peers haven't changed. I'm like, well, that may be coming, but everything else that you're saying is
Yeah.
actually kind of lining up. And I told her the exact same thing, family, that Dr. Allison just shared with you. I told her, well, sis, you got to go to the doctor and ask them specifically. I was like, because you're gonna go and they're gonna do your metabolic panel. I was like, they're gonna look at your A1C. Maybe throw in a lipid or two. But not a full. I was like, go in there specifically, and you're going to ask them to say, these are my concerns. I want to know if I'm experiencing it. I say, and you're going to need to ask them for a full workup, a full laboratory workup, looking at your estrogen levels, your project, like all your hormonal levels, check your thyroid. I was like, they need to be as comprehensive as possible, because if it's not, I say, if your estrogen levels and all those things are still within norm, I say, then now they got to look at something else, because what you're experiencing is not
Yeah.
normal. You should be, aware. So I love that. And I'm glad she called, and she was like, yeah, she's like, I don't know what this is, but I don't like
Yeah.
it. And it's the brain fog. And she knew. She was like, something is off. She's like, I'm just tired all the time. All the things. And so,
Well, this is the other thing. I I've been in circles with white women,
mm,
and they are talking about estrogen supplements and
yeah.
all of these things. Like, we don't, and some of this stuff is over the counter
Yeah.
prescriptions, like we're not talking about that stuff. But
No.
we need to
Yes.
know that we don't have to suffer, and there are things that you can do.
Yeah.
making sure that you are taking your vitamins as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't think about vitamins as medicine, but there it's actually, you would think about it as preventive medicine.
Right.
So my mom was like, she had some health issue and they gave her magnesium and potassium, and she was like,
Mm.
she didn't understand, like, those are vitamins and minerals, but they're your medicine. Like, and
Yeah.
vitamins are medicine. That's a
Yes.
part of your health.
That you need.
You need
Yes,
to make
that you
sure.
need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that include that also in your workup, is to look at the vitamin levels and your mineral levels as well.
Yeah. And that's why I think, we mentioned it early in this conversation, that we have all these advances, right? We can look at so many things with the human body now. Like we're even moved into the realm of being able to look at certain even biomarkers for certain other types of health conditions. And so I'm like, you, if you're going to be going in, they're sticking you anyway to drawing blood, you might as well ask them to ask and take a couple of tubes, perhaps more, again, so that you have the complete picture. And if you're great, you're great. Check that box. Doc,
Yeah.
I'll see you next year, or I'll see you when something changes. But we have to start that way, right? We have
Mhm.
to not let things continue to drag on until they exacerbate, as you mentioned. Um, we already know that, women of color, especially Black women, like, we have higher rates of heart disease and cardiovascular disease. Okay, well, perimenopause, that decline, drop in changes in your hormone levels, like, that impacts you cardiovascularly. So again, you're
Yes.
doubling down on risk. And
Mhm.
so when you aren't paying attention to those things, or as you also shared with us, when you aren't doing I'm not gonna say the bare minimum, but when we aren't doing what we know we should be doing, eating, exercise, the whole nine. um Again, we're just
Drinking water, basic
right.
stuff. It increases your I'm gonna talk to you about that plastic bottle too, but
Yeah, I know.
but
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I do have a something else I usually put it in, but yeah, this was quick. But it's but
yeah,
drink
it
it.
increases the hormonal shifts increase your high blood pressure too. So like, yeah,
Yeah,
pay attention to all those things for sure.
yeah. So so this is, again, and I know, family, we have had a conversation before at menopause. We talked about menopause at Healthy Churches last year. We had some follow-up conversations since then. We're hoping to bring some actual conversations and kind of kitchen table conversations out into the community and for next year. But I want to kind of just give the last few minutes here for you to um just kind of give just your kind of lab word, like your call to action for us. If there's anything else other than kind of just what you've shared for us of what to do to change these narratives, to again have menopause be something that is as easily discussed as diabetes and as some of the other chronic health conditions. And then I want you to definitely share about your amazing conference coming up, because we really
Yeah.
do, family, want you to be able to participate in that.
Well, I would say to normalize the conversations about menopause, not only among your peers and your friends, but with your daughters and your granddaughters. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. It's really important for, if you want your granddaughter to have healthy menopause, then they actually have to start now. And so that's the thing that we don't understand. It's a whole life experience. And like I mentioned, menstrual cycles are your fifth vital sign. They tell you so much information about your health, whether they're heavy, whether they're light, whether they're dark, the color is dark, they're thick or not, thin, mucousy, all of these things tell you a lot of information about your blood pressure, about your sleep, about your energy levels, your stress, the trauma that you might have experienced. So that menstrual cycle tells you a lot. And it also gives you information that leads you into menopause and beyond. Um, I would also say talk to men in your life about this. You know, I'm very grateful that I can have open conversations with my father, with my brother, and with my husband about my menstrual cycle and about
Mm.
breastfeeding and about menopause and perimenopause. Those are important conversations for the whole family to have so that they can
Wow.
support you as well. So yeah, those are the additional things I wanted to add. And also, we're having a conference. Second Shift Playbook is hosting a conference April 10th with Dr. Uche Blackstock as the keynote speaker. So she's amazing. She's a New York Times bestselling author who wrote the book Legacy, and it talks about how we are inheriting a legacy of health that we have the power to change, but also talking about the inherent kind of systemic racism that's impacting our communities. And so, you know, the conference is a women's well-being and equity conference. We'll be talking about different health topics, you know, that impact women, but also using it as a way to rejuvenate and pour into women. We'll have massages and kind of other kind of like, you know, reset experiences and ability to learn more about professional development and networking. So it's kind of a whole financial well-being. So we're thinking about wellness as this well-rounded picture of your health. So go to secondshiftplaybook.com, 2nd shift playbook.com, and you could also join our Slack channel to get a 20% discount. That code, if you join the Slack channel, you'll get the code. If the Slack channel is free to join, and it's a community of women who are kind of just navigating life together. And you'll get the code. It's valid until September 11th. So make sure you join as soon as possible.
Yay.
And you can email me to join the Slack channel and get that code.
Yay. So yeah, so family, I have, you see the link here on the screen now. I also shared it in the chat. So wherever you were joining us from, those joining us on StreamYard directly, those who joined us on Facebook or over on YouTube, you'll have that link that you can click on, go there and register directly. I strongly encourage you, family, to connect with Dr. Allison and all of her work over at the Second Shift Playbook. She's on all the social media platforms, on LinkedIn. Definitely, plan now. You know, the conference is in April, so you have time. So definitely plan now. Share with friends, share with family, and let's show up for this. Let's show up in a space that's being curated for us with some amazing speakers and panelists. I know the bomb will be supporting the conference as well this year, because again, these conversations are important, and I think it's something very powerful when we can all collectively get into a room together to share, to take off those capes, and really connect and learn from one another, and hear from experts who can give us the tools and information that we need. So I also just want to remind you too that registration for Healthy Churches a conference, our 13th annual Healthy Churches conference, is also open as well. You can head over to www.bombingilead.org to register for that. Don't wait until the last minute. Keisha has to register a lot of people late. Let's not put that on Keisha this year. I love Keisha, but I know she's always like she's registering a whole bunch of people the day of. But registration is open now, family, so you can join and be a part of this year's conference this year, November 16th and 17th. And as always, we're going to have tons of amazing speakers, presenters, panelists, and everything to hopefully get us ready and launched into 2027 that is going to be here before we know it. So again, I just want to thank everyone who came on and joined us tonight. Again, it is always my pleasure to bring these conversations to you. Reach out to us again, join our mailing list, join the Slack list for Dr. Allison, so we can all just stay connected. And if there's anything else that we didn't touch on, another conversation you want to have, we want want to hear about it. We want to know about it. So that way we can bring you, the information that is matters to you most. That's a priority for you right now. So again, thank you, family. We hope you have a blessed and amazing rest of your week. That you get some rest this weekend. Dr. Allison, I pray for sleep for the
Thank
baby
you.
tonight and you.
Thank you,
We
Lord Jesus.
we are claiming it. We are pleading the blood for you sleep
Yes.
um tonight for you and the baby. But thank you again so much. And thank you as always, family, for joining us tonight. And so until the next month's Fireside Chat, we look forward to seeing you on social media. Have a good night, family.
Bye. Thank you so much.